I discovered his affair when the other woman was already 6 months pregnant. He told me that if we kept the baby, we could go back to the way we were. I shook my head, my voice trembling as I demanded to know, between me and that child, who would he choose? That day he stayed silent for a long time, unable to give me an answer. Yet after I disappeared, he regretted everything. 5 years of marriage to Ethan Carter, and I had never imagined we would come to an end like this. In front of the hospital, Ethan was carefully helping a young, beautiful woman down the steps. I stood not far away, my gaze colliding with the tender look he gave her. His eyes darted away awkwardly, avoiding mine, unable to meet me head-on. The woman beside him, her belly already pronounced, glanced in my direction, her eyes glistening with sudden tears. After he helped her into the car and spoke a few careful words to her, he finally walked toward me. His steps were calm and cold, no trace of the panic I had seen earlier when I caught them. He reached for my hand, ice cold in his warm grip, and asked why I was at the hospital if I wasn't feeling well. As he spoke, he touched my forehead. I pulled back, avoiding his touch, and asked, "Who is she?" Ethan didn't answer, instead, pulling me into his arms, murmuring softly that she was no one important and that he would explain everything once we were home. His gentle tone finally broke me, and I started to cry. Tilting my head back, I demanded the truth, promising I would believe him if he just said the words. Ethan sighed and gently wiped my tears, then said the baby was his. My tears froze on my cheeks. I forgot how to breathe. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood and pulled away from him, taking slow, stumbling steps back. For a moment, a flicker of anger crossed his face. He pulled me close again, his eyes full of pain, telling me I could blame him, but not to hurt myself. I couldn't understand how he could do something like this and still look at me with such tenderness. In the tense silence between us, the woman stepped out of the car, again hesitated, then stood her ground. Her voice shook as she said, "I had misunderstood that the baby was an accident," and with a bitter smile added that if she could, she would want it less than anyone else. My vision blurred, and though I could not see Ethan's face clearly, I knew him well enough to sense he was no longer as cold as before. That was enough, he told her. But jealousy and hurt boiled inside me until I was shaking. My voice rose in a scream I couldn't control. She flinched, almost stumbling, and he rushed to catch her, holding her protectively in his arms. I stood there frozen, watching the scene, an impulse surging through me. I ran toward them without hesitation, my hand nearly touching her swollen belly, when a forceful shove sent me sprawling to the ground. Sitting there, my palms scraped and bleeding, I laughed bitterly through the pain. Ethan stared at his own hands in disbelief, stunned. That day, he left the woman carrying his child behind and took me home, but I knew our future was gone. Back at the house, he offered no explanation. I sat on the bed for what felt like hours, unmoving, while he stood out on the balcony smoking one cigarette after another all night. I knew he was trying to punish himself in a way that would make me soften. He had always known my weak spots. At dawn, he came back into the room, asking softly if I was hungry, offering to make me breakfast. My voice was hoarse as I called his name and told him we needed to talk. He froze mid-step, not turning around for a long time. He knew my nature well enough to understand I could never overlook something like this. Not now, not ever. Even if he claimed he had been drunk that night, even if he insisted that touching her had been unintentional, I could never forgive him. That was why he had kept it from me. But no one could have predicted that the woman he had only met briefly would end up pregnant, and because of a medical condition, she could not end the pregnancy. And so here we were standing in the wreckage of what once was our life. Ethan eventually walked away, unwilling to face the words he knew I was about to say. I knew he loved me. If he didn't, we would never have made it through all those years together. If he didn't, he would never have spoiled me into the kind of woman who could pout and cry over the smallest things. For a week he didn't come home, but I knew he was checking in through Mrs. Thompson, instructing her daily to make sure I was all right. She told me more than once, "Mrs. Carter, you and Mr. Carter are the most loving couple I have ever seen. If something is wrong, you should just say it. He has lost so much weight lately." She had been with us for years and had never once witnessed us fighting. Even his mother, Margaret Carter, who hadn't liked me at first, had slowly accepted me as her daughter-in-law because of the happiness we shared. Then one evening, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. On the other end was Jason Carter, his younger brother, his voice hesitant as he said, Natalie, Ethan is too drunk. Could you come pick him up? I hung up without answering, my irritation only growing. Yet the image of his back as he left the last time slightly hunched kept flashing in my mind. In the end, I couldn't bear to leave him like that. After pacing for a while, I grabbed my keys and headed out. The door to the private room was ajar, and I stopped outside without going in. He was sprawled on the sofa, completely disheveled, reeking of alcohol, with Vanessa Moore sitting nearby, her pregnant belly unmistakable. One of his friends looked at me helplessly. Mrs. Moore, Natalie wouldn't come and Ethan refused to leave, so I had no choice but to call you. Vanessa smiled faintly and stepped forward to take his arm, but he shoved her away so suddenly that the gasp from those around pulled him out of his drunken haze. He stared at her, a smile twisting his face into something far uglier than tears. Vanessa. It's all because of you. Because of you, Natalie doesn't want me anymore. He repeated those words over and over, then began frantically searching for more alcohol. No one could stop him as he grabbed a bottle, gulping it down, as if determined to destroy himself. Suddenly, Vanessa snatched the bottle from his hands and smashed it against the floor, the sound shattering the tense air. Even Ethan, who moments before had been consumed by rage, froze to look at her. Calm down, Ethan. If you keep this up, you'll scare our baby. I'm tired. Take me home. Ethan Carter, who had never taken orders from anyone not in the city or anywhere else except from me, didn't get angry. In that heavy silence, he simply rose slowly, picked up his coat and followed her out without a word. I leaned against the wall, watching their backs as they walked away, a faint, bitter smile tugging at my lips. Quietly, I followed their taxi to an upscale apartment complex. I watched as he got out with her and disappeared inside. High above, a single light came on. I sat in my car all night waiting, but he never emerged. At 7 a.m, I saw him return to that building with a bag of breakfast in hand. The sight of his familiar back made my chest ache, and I drove away in silence. I called him home later, but said nothing about divorce. When I saw how much weight he had lost, I turned my face away to avoid his eyes. Where were you the night I didn't come for you? His fingers trembled slightly before he answered after a long pause. That he had stayed at the office. I couldn't even name what I was feeling. There wasn't much pain left, but the disappointment was sharp and clear. When had he learned to lie to me? The man who once vowed to be honest with me forever had changed. I didn't call him out. It no longer mattered. How far along is she? He hesitated for a few seconds, his voice cautious, as if afraid to hurt me. Almost 7 months. At that, he dropped to one knee before me, bowing his head deeply until his forehead pressed against my knee. His tears soaked through the fabric of my dress, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Addie, I was wrong. Please don't leave me." In all my years with Ethan Carter, I had never seen him cry. But now his body trembled so violently that it shook my own heart. Still, I knew that this was not the time to let my resolve waver. "Arrange for me to meet her," I told him. We agreed to meet at Vanessa Moore's home, and Ethan waited outside the door while I stepped in. Vanessa sat with one hand caressing her belly, her eyes glowing with the anticipation of the child she carried. That night the room was dim, my nerves strung so tight I could hardly breathe. But the next morning, as she spoke softly and smiled, lifting her head to meet my eyes, her face was as delicate and serene as ever. "Natalie, soon, Ethan and I will be welcoming our baby. Maybe you should step aside and let us be a family." Without Ethan present, the woman in front of me seemed to transform, revealing a side of herself I had always known was there. I wasn't surprised. The night I came looking for Ethan, I had seen the way she glanced toward the door, knowing I was there before I even entered. Slowly she rose and opened a door that had been half closed, revealing a warm, carefully decorated nursery. Every detail in the room had been chosen by Ethan himself, she said with pride, and I could hear the unspoken message he was looking forward to this child. My pulse hammered in my ears. So he did want this baby after all. He wasn't indifferent as I had thought. My body felt drained of strength, one hand bracing against the dining table. I accidentally knocked over a glass of water, the shattering sound like knives piercing my chest, leaving 1,000 cracks behind. Hearing the noise, Ethan rushed in to find me unsteady on my feet, and Vanessa sprawled on the floor, moaning. That was the moment I knew that in his eyes, I was no longer his first choice. Vanessa's triumphant smile told me she knew it too. As she passed me, Ethan hesitated for just a heartbeat before walking past to lift her into his arms and carry her out. He never looked back. I stood there for a long time, only slowly accepting the truth he had abandoned me. I followed them to the hospital, arriving just as his parents did. It turned out I was the only one kept in the dark. They had known all along. The moment Margaret Carter saw me, she slapped me hard across the face. "If anything happens to my grandson, you'll pay for it." Ethan immediately stepped in front of me, shielding me entirely with his body, which only fueled her fury. "Ethan, usually I let you do as you please, but now she's trying to harm your son." He laughed softly, but his voice carried the weight of suppressed defiance. "So what lost is lost. If they hadn't kept this baby in secret, how could Natalie be this heartbroken?" No one knew that when he saw Vanessa fall, his first reaction had been relief. Faced with this unexpected turn, he felt a twinge of regret. The doctor came out to announce that the baby was safe, and his parents rushed in to fuss over Vanessa, while she kept casting those fragile, pleading looks toward Ethan, who stood outside the door. She had dared to plot against me. There was no way I would let her win. My cheek still burned from Margaret's slap, and I tilted my head just enough for Ethan to see, knowing it would sting him. I told him I wanted to leave, and he walked me out without hesitation. As I glanced back at Vanessa lying in bed, I gave her a smile that mirrored her own earlier one. At least for now, Ethan was still standing on my side. But even that loyalty meant nothing to me anymore. In the days he believed I had accepted the existence of that child, I had already begun quietly preparing for my departure. I packed all of my belongings, the divorce papers already signed and ready, just waiting for the day to leave. Yes, I would go on the day Vanessa Moore gave birth. She wanted me to hand Ethan Carter over to her, along with the baby, so I would grant her wish. Lately, I had been feeling a dull ache low in my abdomen, and that day I went to the hospital just for a checkup, never expecting to run into them. I registered for another examination and waited for the results. When I held that piece of paper in my hands, I let out a small laugh, but tears rolled down my cheeks at the same time. We had waited for this child for 5 years, only to believe it would never happen. And now, of all times, it had come when everything was broken beyond repair. I walked through the hospital corridors, clutching the pregnancy certificate, unsure what to do with the tiny life inside me. I knew I should let go, but I couldn't bring myself to. The decision felt even harder than walking away from Ethan. I lifted my head and froze. He was walking out of the exam room with Vanessa. We hadn't spoken of her in days, and he had taken my silence as acceptance. "The baby is healthy, Ethan." "I'm so happy," her voice rang out. He responded without inflection, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "You've taken good care of it." They spoke of the child, neither realizing I was standing right there. The moment he saw me, Ethan dropped her hand and stepped away from her. The silence stretched until I broke it. "What a coincidence. You two go on, I'll head out." He grabbed my hand in alarm, unwilling to let me leave. "Natty, listen to me." I gently pulled free, my voice calm and empty. "I'm not angry. This baby is your responsibility, I understand." Vanessa's eyes lit up instantly. "So you agree to keep the baby?" From the last time we met, I had no desire to show her an ounce of goodwill. "Miss Moore, your child will be born in a few days. Whether I agree or not makes no difference, does it?" Her face paled, her voice trembling as she murmured something about being forced into this. But at this point, her words meant nothing. I turned and walked away, not letting Ethan follow, heading back to the doctor's office. The choice had already been made for me. As I left, he leaned close, his voice low. "Natty, once the baby is born, we can go back to how we were okay." He knew I hadn't been sleeping, knew there was now a stranger's child between us, a distance we could never cross again. I closed my eyes and said nothing, but as he was about to leave the room, I called his name. Ethan, between me and that child. "Who do you choose?" His expression was a mix of shock and discomfort, and I shook my head, telling him to go. When I lay back down, he said softly, "Wait for me, I'll make everything right." But I didn't need him to make anything right anymore. I would do it myself. After he left, I placed the divorce papers and a USB drive on the nightstand, then walked out of the home I had cherished so much. 2 days before my flight, I returned to my hometown. Since marrying Ethan, I had never been back. The small one-story house I remembered had been rebuilt into a 2-story home standing out on the street. Someone with sharp eyes recognized me and called out that the eldest daughter of the Hayes family, who married into wealth, had come back. Within a minute, I was surrounded by neighbors. My parents stepped out of the house, but when they saw my empty hands, the smiles froze on their faces. They led me inside, and as soon as the door closed, my mother's fingers dug cruelly into my side. "You worthless girl, coming back without bringing us anything. What a waste of the years we fed you." My voice was even as I answered, "I'm divorced. From now on, Ethan Carter won't be sending you money." The change in their faces was instant, as if disaster had struck. This was my family people who had only ever seen me as a resource to be drained, selling me off like a commodity. When they realized I was leaving with nothing, not a single coin to my name, they showed no pity, only the cruelty of locking me out and telling me to go. Standing outside the closed gate, I felt no heartbreak. In front of people like them, I could only feel gratitude toward Ethan Carter. He had been the shield between me and the storms, giving me 5 years of relative peace. But now that we were over, I had no intention of letting them interfere in his new life either. With that loose end tied off, I boarded my flight without a backward glance, leaving behind the city I had called home for so many years. Vanessa Moore gave birth to an 8-pound baby boy, and Ethan Carter became a father. I meanwhile sat on the plane, lost in heavy memories. I thought back to the earliest days of us when my family had called to say my grandfather was gravely ill and needed money for treatment. They told me they had none, and that if I didn't provide it, they wouldn't get him care. I emptied every cent I had saved, sending it all to them without keeping a single dollar for myself. For the next month until payday, I survived on instant noodles. When Ethan found out a man who had grown up in comfort and never known, the chill of going without his eyes went red as he asked me why I hadn't told him. Before I could respond, he pulled me into his arms, his voice thick with emotion as he told me not to forget that I had him. That day I realized I had finally found someone I could lean on. In the 5 years that followed, he never broke a promise to me. From the day my grandfather passed, he kept the rest of my selfish relatives at bay, never allowing them to trouble me again. If you ask me whether Ethan treated me well, I would say yes, at least until the whole mess with Vanessa began. But love alone isn't always enough to last a lifetime. Even if I hadn't left this time, that child would have remained a thorn in my heart, a wound that would only fester until it was unbearable. I wanted our beautiful memories to end here while we still loved each other. When the plane landed, I lifted my eyes to the clear blue sky and told myself that from now on, the sky and sea were vast and we would live our separate lives well. When the baby was born, Ethan felt a moment of pure startled joy. This was the child he had once wished for his own blood, his son. And so in that happiness, he stayed at the hospital with Vanessa for one night, not coming home. He thought he could take care of her and the baby, sever all ties, and then return to the life we had before. But I hadn't waited. I had vanished without a trace. When Mrs. Thompson came to the hospital to find him, he was cradling the baby in his arms. Upon hearing that I had left, he didn't rush after me. He simply closed his eyes and breathed deeply, knowing this time I would not forgive him. The divorce papers sat unsigned on the nightstand beside a USB drive I had left. He had watched everything on it. Those 2 items together were a cruel monument to his past foolishness. The final video was a message I had recorded for him. By the time he finished watching, Ethan Carter was crying so hard his body shook. He knew he had been wrong beyond repair. I had known everything. Ethan, all these years, the fact that I never gave the Carter family a child was my fault. I knew how much you wanted one of your own, but whatever the reason you chose to keep this baby back then, it no longer matters. Let's end things cleanly. I had seen through his calculation the truth that he wanted to keep that child. For someone as selfish as him, the most important things would always be the ones that belonged to him. Nothing else mattered. If he hadn't wanted it, that child would never have been born. It was his consent that allowed his parents to watch Vanessa Moore's belly grow, his quiet joy that gave her the opening to hurt the woman he once claimed to love most. Ethan Carter wanted to have it both ways, but in the end, he lost the one person who mattered more than anyone. The baby was already here. What would he do now? His mother's face burned with outrage when she realized he planned to give her newborn grandchild away. "Without this baby, Natty will forgive you," she insisted. But Ethan had made up his mind. Not for 1 second did he want to keep the child. He had already found an adoptive family and set aside a large sum of money to ensure the baby would want for nothing. Seeing her son so unyielding, Margaret Carter broke down in tears, pleading with him. This is your flesh and blood. How can you be so heartless? I know you're in pain because Natalie left, but no matter what you do, she won't come back. To you, no one will ever matter more than her. Mom, I regret everything he said, hoarsely swallowing the bitterness that rose in his throat as he took the month-old infant in his arms and walked away. The story sent shockwaves through their social circle, becoming a topic of gossip for months. Some called him ruthless, others hopelessly devoted, but either way, the Carter name became a quiet joke. 6 months later, Ethan finally tracked down my address. Just before he could come to me, Olivia Bennett, his cousin, and my closest friend stopped him, saying that if he came, she would walk out of my life. He had once loved her like a sister, and we all knew it. So why had he been so blind in this? At her reproach, Ethan couldn't say a word. Time would never give him the chance to undo what he'd done. After a long silence, he asked softly, "How is she?" Olivia told him. "I was doing well. Eating, sleeping, even gaining weight." Ethan's lips curved into a bitter smile, the sharp angle of his jaw making his thinness more striking. "That's good. Take care of her for me?" After ending the call, he leaned back into the dark, a low, broken laugh escaping him. At least he knew where I was. In another place, Olivia slammed her phone down, muttering curses under her breath. I laughed at her lingering anger and teased gently. "If I'm not upset, why should you be? How can it be the same?" she shot back. "You and my cousin loved each other so deeply. How did it come to this?" Everyone who knew about our breakup felt a pang of regret. But fate had run its course. As my closest friend, she could ask what no one else dared. Her eyes dropped to my stomach. "Natty, what are you going to do about the baby?" "You're not going to tell him." I rested a protective hand over the child that was mine alone, my gaze warm with love. I hadn't gone through with ending the pregnancy. At the very last moment, I couldn't do it. I had no family anymore, no Ethan Carter, and I couldn't face a lifetime of solitude. She would have no father, only me. A month later, I gave birth to a baby girl, the person I would love most in this world. I worked and raised her, and our life was calm and happy. By investing my skills into Olivia's company, I helped it grow into a thriving business, and I could give my daughter a life of comfort and security. Time passed and she turned 5. Because of Olivia's interference, Ethan never dared seek me out, though each month he asked about me through her. Once she asked if I thought she should tell him the truth, and I agreed that apart from keeping our daughter's existence hidden, there was nothing else I cared to hide. When her company shifted its business model, Olivia decided to return to the States for her wedding. Naturally, I went with her. My daughter's growth had been a little slow, smaller than other children her age, and she looked nothing like Ethan. Besides, he already had a son. I doubted he would care about her. Upon our return, a last-minute work issue kept Olivia busy, so she asked her fiancé to take my daughter and me home first. When our plane landed, Ethan was waiting outside. Because Olivia often visited my home for dinner, her fiancé was familiar with us, and he naturally took my daughter's hand as we walked out. The simple gesture made Ethan's heart clench, and in that instant he misunderstood completely. His chest tightened painfully, his throat constricting until it was hard to breathe. When he saw us walking toward him, it seemed to take all his strength just to speak a few words. "You're back," he asked, his voice low and strained. I gave a small nod, offering no further reply. Time had dulled the fire of whatever we once had, and today in the moment I laid eyes on Ethan Carter again, I knew I had truly stepped out of the past. Outside the airport, he offered to drive me home. Daniel Brooks, Olivia's fiancé, understood perfectly well that Ethan was misreading the situation between us, but he didn't correct him. Instead, he smiled politely and said, "That's all right, we already have a car." I got into the vehicle without looking back. Ethan remained where he stood, his gaze following us until the car disappeared from view. From the back seat, my daughter asked Mommy who was that strange man. I think he was about to cry. "Do grown-ups cry too?" I smoothed her soft hair, keeping my eyes forward. "He's just a friend of mine," I said softly. Maybe the wind got in his eyes. Not long after, Olivia called to tell me that Ethan had asked about my daughter. Following the plan we had agreed on long ago, she told him the little girl was adopted, and he seemed to believe her. Olivia returned to the States a few days after I did, and as soon as she was back, she was swept up in preparations for her wedding. She handed most of the company's affairs over to me, and after a few days of simply enjoying time with my daughter, I threw myself back into work. Somehow, Ethan found out where I lived. Lately, his car had been parked beneath my building night after night, often until morning. I pretended not to notice. To me, he was nearly a stranger now, someone who no longer had the power to touch my life. On the day of Olivia's wedding, I took my daughter to the ceremony and unexpectedly came face to face with Ethan and his parents. Olivia was his cousin, and in their social circle, many people recognized me. The moment they saw me with a child, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Ethan deliberately stepped in front of me, shielding me from their curious stares and from the sharp, hostile glare of his mother. Those who disliked Margaret Carter seized the moment, asking me loudly, "Ms. Carter, is this little one part of the Carter family, Mrs. Carter must be blessed, surrounded by grandchildren." I could tolerate anything they said about me, but the moment they dragged my daughter into it, my patience ended. I gave the woman a cool, cutting smile. "You're the blessed one," I replied evenly. "Your family is full and thriving. I hear your husband just welcomed his 7th child from outside the marriage, only 10 years old." The color drained from her face, and she fell silent. Still, the exchange made me uneasy. I decided that after the ceremony, I would leave early with my daughter. But when I turned away for just a moment, she was gone. Panic flared in my chest. I searched the crowd, and when I found her, she was standing directly in front of Margaret Carter, her tiny chin tilted defiantly. "Grandma," she said firmly, "you shouldn't look at my mommy like that." Margaret froze, stunned by the child's boldness. Slowly, she reached out her hands, trembling as she touched my daughter's cheek. "Tell me, sweetheart," she asked softly, "how old are you?" Following the script I had drilled into her, my daughter held up 4 fingers. "I'm 4 years old," she said clearly. Margaret's eyes darkened, her lips moving in a low murmur. Too alike. Far too alike. The little girl in front of her was the mirror image of herself as a child. My pulse pounded. I could see the recognition flickering in her gaze, and fear gripped me. I stepped forward quickly, intent on taking my daughter away. Just then, a boy of about 6 blurted out, "That's not true. You told me you were 5. My daughter's cheeks flushed pink with embarrassment as she turned to me. "Mommy, I forgot." I closed my eyes briefly, exhaling in resignation. It didn't matter. Ethan already had a son, and his parents already had an heir. No one had the right to take my daughter from me. Throughout the rest of the ceremony, Olivia was pulled aside repeatedly by guests wanting to gossip, but her eyes kept darting toward me. I met her gaze across the room, gave her a steady nod, and silently told her everything was fine. After the wedding ended, Sophia and I followed Ethan Carter's parents back to the Carter family estate. In the car, Margaret Carter held my daughter close, her face glowing with joy. Even Richard Carter, usually so reserved, wore a rare smile. But the happiest of all was Ethan. From the moment we stepped inside, his eyes never left Sophia, not for a single second. When Mrs. Thompson took her outside to play, I finally spoke. "She is mine. I will never hand her over to you." My firm tone seemed to ignite something in Margaret. She insisted, "She's a Carter granddaughter. I cannot allow you to take her away. Name your price. Tell me what it is." Seeing no point in continuing, I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, only for Ethan to block my way. "You've raised her well," he said softly, "but my mother has no say in this." His words carried an excitement I had never heard from him before, his voice gentler than usual, and I hated how part of me noticed it. But the truth still stood. He already had a son, and his parents already had a grandson. Why fight me for my daughter? At that, Ethan's face hardened, his eyes turning cold, as if the matter had nothing to do with him. His parents' expressions shifted too, a faint sneer curling at the corners of their mouths. I almost thought I had imagined it, but this was the same child they had once longed for with all their hearts. Later that day, Olivia Bennett told me the truth. After I left, Ethan had given the son Vanessa Moore bore to someone else to raise. When the boy turned 4, his parents brought him back to the Carter family, but Ethan refused to acknowledge him. Without his father's recognition, he never even took the Carter name. Growing up away from his parents' carrying habits, his grandparents disliked, the boy became distant. And because his presence meant Ethan rarely came home, they grew colder toward him. Now he shut himself in his room all day, avoiding everyone, a lonely figure in his own home. I asked Olivia, "What about Vanessa? Doesn't she care?" Olivia's voice dropped to a whisper, as though afraid someone might overhear. "I heard that my brother was set up by her," she said. There was something in the wine that night. According to Olivia, after watching the video, I had left him, Ethan began to suspect her. That video I had recorded at her home on the day we met. Knowing what kind of person she was, I had made sure to be prepared. Not long after Ethan found proof, without hesitation, he sent Vanessa to prison. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of surprise and pity. Surprise at the ending, pity for the boy she had brought into the world. From the moment Ethan learned we had a daughter, he began trying to win me back. His parents encouraged it, eager for the chance to see Sophia often. Ethan used every tactic from the early days of our courtship, and every day I found myself dodging him. Seeing this, Olivia suggested, maybe you should give him another chance. For a moment, I wavered. When I asked Sophia, she agreed, but there was hesitation in her eyes. I didn't press her, choosing instead to wait for her to speak freely. Mom, I like it here. Can we not go back? She asked quietly. I studied her, then asked, do you like the man who always stands outside our building? My daughter was clever, thoughtful, never once asking about her father. This time her eyes lit up. He's my dad, isn't he? I nodded. Yes, he's your father. And because of her, because her happiness came first, I decided we would stay. As for Ethan, who refused to let me go, I had my own way of handling him. I invited him to meet privately. It took 3 attempts before he finally showed up. We knew each other too well. If I hadn't asked to see him alone, perhaps some thread between us would have remained. But now he knew there was nothing left to salvage. Not even for our child, he asked, his voice heavy with longing. His question made my anger flare. Ethan, I am a person before I am a mother. I will do anything for my daughter, but it must be my choice. Then I looked him straight in the eye. But what about you? Why did you drink the wine Vanessa gave you? You've always been careful, never drinking from a stranger's hand. So why that night? I stirred my coffee, speaking as if discussing something far away. My question made his hands tremble. His lips moved, but no sound came. At last, after a long silence, he closed his eyes in defeat. That night, he had let himself feel something for her. This was the truth. I never wanted to hear the truth he had tried to explain that night years ago. In that single moment of weakness, she had taken her chance and destroyed everything. And he knew it. He just didn't want to admit it. As I stood to leave, he began to cry. But I would never cry for him again.